Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm, of course, your host, Joe, and really excited about my guest today. He's a friend of mine. I've got to spend some time with him at retreats and some other fun activities. And he's just an all-around good person, and I'm excited to hear about his story. So today I'm bringing you my friend Rusty C. And Rusty's sobriety date is January 28th, 2025. I did that to you, Rusty. It is not 2025. It is 2022. That's a funny story in itself, but it is 2022. He's an active member of the AA Early Bird Group in Noonan, Georgia. He's committed to the program. He has a sponsor. His sponsor has a sponsor, and that sponsor has a sponsor, and Rusty knows them all. A Georgia resident since 1993, Rusty is deeply involved in service, both in his home group and within his sponsor family. He's been married to his incredible wife, Susan, for 32 years. That's amazing. And is a proud father to his son and grandfather to his beautiful granddaughter. Outside of recovery, Rusty enjoys the beach, running, skiing, and spending time at recovery retreats and conventions, where he continues to grow in his journey. Welcome to the show, Rusty.
Joe, thanks for having me. This is great.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, it's been a good day. It's been a very good day.
Good. Well, so tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what was life like as Rusty as a kid.
Yeah, so I grew up in northern New Jersey, Ramsey, New Jersey, which is about 35 minutes or so northwest of Manhattan, New York. Fairly, upper middle class, affluent area, suburbia. That many years ago, there was a lot of freedom, as a child as well as you grew up. So you're when you woke up in the morning, you jammed a little food down your throat, and then see you at dinner time. And parents were just okay with that. And my parents were both worked even back then, which was kind of rare. Up until about called 11, 12, I had to your normal family life. We spent a lot of time as a family together. We had hobbies of skiing together. The boys have an older brother, and my father, most Saturdays we were on our dirt bikes for the day riding. We were fortunate enough to take some unique vacations. Some I remember because I was older, and some I don't remember because I was real young. But so all in all, that part up until early middle school was just normal suburban family kind of enjoying life. A lot of activities with sports between the kids and school, and so it was a really I had a grandmother that lived right mile away, and my uncle, my dad's brother, lived 15 minutes away. So we spent a lot of time with family. That all began to change right about that early middle school. My parents were having problems. And ended up separating and eventually divorcing, which took a long time. And it was there's no great way to get divorced, but there's a better way, and they chose the non-better way. And what I mean by that is they manipulated the children to kind of feed and get things out of the divorce. And so there about seventh grade, I made a decision that today I believe is God inspired. At the time, I had no idea why I made the decision, but I decided to get away from both my parents and move with my grandmother. Right?
Okay.
Sound, solid, hardworking woman, which is my mom, my father's mom. My father's dad passed away when my dad was 9. So my grandmother raised 2 boys, put them through college, all these great things. So I said, this is a great place to go. So for the next, 5 or 6 years, I lived with my grandmother, and there's a lot of great that came from that. And then there was a lot of things whereas, as irresponsibilities of an adolescent showed up, you can manipulate a woman who works 2 full-time jobs pretty easily.
Yeah.
And I tended to do that some. And so I think the really good sound judgment as a 7th grader to move with my grandmother was great. And then that was replaced by, wow, I got a lot of freedom because there's no accountability as a teenager, and then that sent things down a more challenging path. But all in all, there's a couple things that she really did for me. And one of those things was work ethic and being an incredible provider, which is good characteristics that I took to the extreme, later on. And I can talk a bit more about a little bit later on, but
sure.
So I get to go back to that part of the country often because my current wife now has family all right there. She's one of 7, and the other 6 siblings live there. Actually, I'll be back there tomorrow night and having dinner with some high school friends of mine. So
oh wow,
yeah. So it's 2 guys that I grew up with from 5 years old on, and so it's always fun. Nice. There you go. That's cool.
That's really nice. Yeah, that's where I'm from too. I think that was one of the connections you and I had because I was originally from New Jersey as well. And there's exactly. Just we always ask it, what exit were you from?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I was exit 8. For the record.
You were much further south. I was 172. So.
Oh wow, yeah, you were up there for sure.
Well, the next exit is New York State. So.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, I get it. You were northern. I was more neutral in central Jersey. But so what? So I know you had a little more freedom with your like you said with your grandmother. I mean, what did you use with that freedom? I mean, this is
I can look back on that now, and since the first, I started, drinking in high school, like a lot of people, I guess, did, but I was immediately a blackout drinker. I mean, from minute one, right? And it didn't really matter how much I had. I could have as little as nothing. I would tend to be a blackout drinker pretty quickly. I experimented with a few other substances in high school, but nothing else. Really, alcohol has always been my my domain and challenge. And I got in a car wreck from drinking. Matter of fact, I mean the terrible side of that story is my friends saw me get in the back seat of a car to drive away, and I realized I was on the wrong seat. I got out of the car, went up, got into the front seat, and then 10 minutes later hit a telephone pole at 60 miles an hour.
Oh wow.
Which is now become a huge piece of my story because as I got later in life and alcoholism became bigger and bigger, drinking and driving was a huge part of my life. So that was just kind of a metaphor. But so the reason why at the time, I look back now and right away I knew that alcohol had a different effect on me. I had warnings, right? My mom is one of 7, and 6 out of the 7 siblings all have alcohol problems. They're all sober today, and they all got sober different ways. Yeah. But it's there, right?
Right.
And my mom, during the time I lived with my grandmother, my mom, would be just like I was. She would get so wrecked she couldn't make it to work for days at a time. I just didn't. I chose not to believe it because I wasn't there every day with her, and I definitely chose not to be helpful for her. That's for sure. I mean, right. She eventually found her way on, but so that was all through high school, and then I had a short stint where I went away to college, and that didn't last very long because I went to college to be a skier and to be an alcoholic and drink like a college student should be.
Yeah.
And then I had come home, from college to visit, and I still had at the time my girlfriend, which is actually my wife today. And when I came back from college there, winter break, we found out that she was pregnant, right? And I was, 18, 19 years old. She was 18 years old. I'm not incredibly responsible. I'm incredibly irresponsible. Couldn't manage, if you put $2 in my pocket, I spent $5, my wife comes from a, very, very close knit family. Like I said, 7 kids, on Sundays, the whole family were always at that point, we're always together. When we walked out of the doctor's office when we found out she was pregnant, and I said, wow, I have to take care of somebody else beside myself. And I stopped drinking that day.
Yeah.
Right. I said, okay, I gotta make something else a priority. And here's the piece I said, my grandmother was a great provider, right? And that's what I became. I became a provider. The only responsibility I felt I had in the life of my wife and now my unborn child, but eventually my son, was to be a provider.
Yeah.
And that was, I didn't need to be there to be caring and loving and helpful. I just needed to be there. So every Friday or every other Friday, a paycheck showed up home. Right. And that was enough.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a lot of that is what the next 17 years looked like, was providing. I was still incredibly dishonest to my wife during that time. I never knew how to be vulnerable. I never learned that. My childhood didn't have an environment where you said you loved each other, or, hey, I'm having a problem, I don't know how to do this. There was just no vulnerability. And I think a lot of that was there was so much fear to even have open conversations, because by the time you were ready for it, my parents were going through what they were going through.
Right.
And my grandmother just, how do I go sit her down at 11 o'clock at night and say, listen, I need to talk to you, when she's got to be up and at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. Right. Yeah. So I just never learned that. So because of that, for the next 17 years after my son was born, and then eventually my wife and I, girlfriend, then my wife and I got married, I didn't know how to be open and honest. And I wasn't open or honest. And I lied to her about trivial things. I lied to her about large things.
Yeah.
There was an event about 17 years in our marriage, and, where I was not faithful with my wife, and we were working through that. And she asks me, we're on this trip in Washington, D.C., kind of like to try to rekindle our marriage. And she said, why don't you drink? I don't understand it. Because we never talked about it being a problem, or never talked that I would black out. It just, it's been 17 years at this point.
Yeah. So
we're at dinner, and I had a glass of wine with my wife. And this is, roughly, 36, 37, 38 years old. In the next year or two, it was, occasional, at neighborhood parties, a drink here and there, and maybe I get drunk, but not terribly bad. And that lasted for a little while. And then, it became, very, very progressive, and then, the disease doesn't stop. You're just right back where you were. And,
right.
And at this point in time in my life, I'm traveling, I'm working. We live in Georgia, but I'm working in different cities. So I'm commuting Monday through Friday, so, every night I'm leaving work, and I'm in some sort of a restaurant or bar drinking. And then it's getting to the point where I'm that's not enough. I got to get bottles at home. I'm still functioning at work, but people are starting to notice, right, a little bit, but nobody's saying anything at this point in time. But so I say that this is a period of time where we were married single people, right? On paper we were married, but we didn't know each other,
right?
Susan took care of the home, she paid the bills. I didn't have to worry about money because I was always on company expenses. I traveled all the world. I was gone, call it 300 days a year, and I was providing, right? Money was in the bank. I was making more money every year. When things would go terribly wrong, I would essentially vacation our way out of it, or buy my way out of it. Let's go on this wonderful vacation. Let's buy a new car. Let's buy a bigger house, whatever it might be. Right. And I'd hear my wife say, none of that stuff's important to me. But in my own mind, I'd say, oh, she's got a smile on her face. She's happy with me today.
Right.
Right. Inside, she's, now I know inside she's just boiling and steaming and unhappy and to be very honest, feeling trapped. Right.
Yeah.
She's got no career at this point. We got this child that's, middle school to high school, middle school. I'm trapped and come from a family that, really respects and honors tradition of marriage, so this went on for a number of years. And then, the company I was at 15 years at this point, was an incredible job. I have no formal college education, and through 15 years, I got all different types of responsibilities to running 7 businesses that were 2,500 people, far beyond my capabilities. But I got this new boss, and he had a brother that was an alcoholic, and I know this after the fact, and he started seeing the effects in me. And I remember one day he put this olive branch out to me in his office. He says, "Hey, my brother really struggles with alcohol addiction, and then he went away and he got some help." And I'm like, I'm appalled that he's even telling me the story. Like, Are you implying that I'm an alcoholic? Meanwhile, I'm having a glass of vodka on the way to work just to calm my nerves.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of accepting that help, I told my wife that, these people want me to move to Florida. It's not good. We're all trying to get back together now. I'm going to quit that job. I get a better job. And that's the beginning of the cycle of either quitting jobs or getting fired from them because of alcoholism. Quitting because they were finding out, or fired because I showed up to work drunk or whatever. Right. And that goes on for the next period of about 6 or 7 years of either, being with work or being without work, and the level of stress I put on my family during this time was incredible. The ironic part is, for a good portion of the time, I'd quit or get fired on Friday and have a new job on Monday. Right. And so like there was like almost no effect. It was like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
But, I work in this industry that is very large, but yet again, very small. And that started to run out as people started to know who I was, right? The community or the industry spoke.
Yeah.
So the last time I got fired from work from alcoholism because I was at work drunk, it took me 7 months to find a new job, and it was incredibly stressful on the family, because the world just got smaller. The available opportunities out there shrunk, right? And by this time, I've been into I've been in and out of 3 treatment centers, a couple detox centers, a whole bunch of outpatient programs, sober living.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with AA on a regular basis. And I had come to the point that I had admitted that I was an alcoholic. I admitted that my life was unmanageable, right? Because I had nothing but proven evidence of it. I couldn't hold a job. I didn't know how to pay a bill. I didn't know how to. I didn't even know I wake up on a Saturday and like, okay, I need to be helpful to my family today. My wife. I didn't even know how. I didn't know what that meant. Like, I'd have to ask her, "What do you need help with?" Even though the toilets are dirty, the lawn is 1.5 feet high. I didn't even know how to. I didn't know how to live. So I knew I had a problem. With alcoholism, because I'm that person in the book. Once I start, I can't stop, and once I've stopped, I can't stay stopped. I just didn't have a solution. It was staring me right in front of the face, right in front of my face. Two meetings a day, 7 days a week. I'm listening to the solution, but but that wasn't Rusty's solution, right? Yeah. Rusty's solution. I'm gonna do this one, but not that one. I'm gonna talk to these 3 guys because I like them. I'm gonna go to these 2 meetings because I like it. Yeah. I'm going to tell you that Jimmy is my sponsor, but I never talked to Jimmy. Right. I believed in God, but I didn't think that God helped people that weren't there to, to be in favor of God. So that piece of the equation just never crossed my mind. Right. So I got 7 years of AA in me. In the course of 7 years, I got a year once, handful of other sets of months, 90 days, 120 days. Matter of fact, at the tail end of that is about the time that I met you, Joe, at that retreat. I showed up there the first time at our retreat with 18 days sober. And it wasn't the last time. It wasn't the last time I went out. I went out one more time after that. In that whole thing. So, the one thing that I look at with this whole process here is that didn't understand it then, but with this self-reflection you have now and what I understand about the program and about recovery as life is, God just kept dragging me back in the doors. God just kept dragging me back to meet people like Joe and to meet other people that I met up there and the connections and to witness what people are going through, because I couldn't see it. So I had to see it in other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, 7 years, a variety of different, of losing jobs, a variety of different treatment centers, a real big understanding of the big book. Cause I thought knowledge was everything. I was reading it and,
you could quote it pretty good, couldn't you?
You go to page 82 and it says this, and I was nowhere near step 9, but I was talking about it. Right. And, that got me 24 white chips. That mentality got me 24 white chips, and I really don't speak about that much because I'm not sure that that's a helpful way to the newcomer to say, don't worry, you can get 24 too and keep coming, right? With the variety of other substances that are out there and the lethality of some of those substances, I won't typically speak about that as much anymore. Just that I'm not a one chip wonder is about the way I'll put it.
But you're resilient. I think that's what that shows, Rusty, is when you have that many, when you go out that many times and come back, and that is not a requirement for anyone. There's a lot of one chip wonders. I was not one of those either, but I think you keep coming back. I think that shows so much resilience and so much hope to people,
I think this is the grace that I was given with that, right? The first many of those white chips were not for me to come back. They were for keep law enforcement off my back.
Yeah.
Get a court card signed. Give my wife an hour of peace because she knew where I was and I wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
Right. To show work that I was doing things better. Right. So those things, I respected work or the police or the rules or my wife enough to say, okay, I'm going to do this for them. But it wasn't until, the last couple where I finally said, I don't care about that stuff. That stuff will be here or won't be here. I don't have an attachment to it. There's got to be, I got to show up in a store, for myself. And there was some level of turning point. Like I said, there was a few times I didn't stay sober at that, but that's because I still didn't want to accept all the things you have to do to get sober and then therefore to stay sober. Right.
Right.
I still wanted Rusty still wanted to be a piece of the controlling factor, that whole thing,
That's who we are, man.
I think in his time towards the end, I had done 2 5th steps and was entirely dishonest with both of them, I'm sitting down with one guy and I got it all written down. The one thing is I wrote it all down, but I'd grab 3 pages and turn it. I'd skip the 2 pages I didn't want to talk to him about.
I get it. I honestly get it.
So the last time I went through it, it was like I wrote down like page 12 of 28, and I'd turn the page and say, I'm on page 13 of 28. I'm on page 14 of 28.
Yeah.
Just so I can hold myself accountable to being truthful with the guy that was taking such a time to help me out. But
yeah. So what do you think was the turning point?
I tell this when I share my story, right? And I mentioned earlier that I didn't have a solution. I know what intellectually I knew what the solution was by reading the book, right? But I didn't have a solution. And what I'm going to say now, I'd heard some version of this in many meetings from many people, but I'm I didn't mention, I had 4 DUIs in the course of 6 years, right? So I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. I got this after being out of work for 7 months. I got this job. It has me going to Jacksonville Monday through Friday, and I'm renting a room in an apartment that's just awful. I mean, I'm grateful because it had air conditioning and the roof didn't leak, but that was about the extent of it. And my soft self, needs, a plush couch and a 50-inch TV to live, right?
Yeah.
But I'm in Jacksonville and I don't have a car, right? Because it's one of the moments where either the legal system says you can't drive, or my wife says there's no way you can drive because I can't trust you in a car.
Yeah.
So I'm taking the bus from my apartment to work every day, and it's 8.5 miles, and it takes 2 hours on the bus, right? And that whole time I was grateful the bus was there, right? Because I'm getting to read in the mornings on the bus. I'm getting to listen to the AA speakers and stuff like that on the bus.
Yeah.
I'm still not getting it though. I'm still holding onto the wheel with my fists clenched tight. I got a sponsor in Jacksonville, and I'm going to a meeting on Tuesday nights, and he's a super nice guy. But I had enough of AA through people I knew, what I thought it took and what I needed to be taken through to get done. And we weren't doing the stuff. We hadn't read a page in a book together, and so, but I'm on this bus one morning and I love this. I love the tail end of the story is, I'm listening to Chris R out of Texas, who I love because he's so bloody direct and he's so like, stick your head out. I'm going to hit you with a 2x4 and tell you the way it's going to be. Right.
Yeah.
And 24 white chips. That's what I needed. Right. I needed the punch in the face. And on the tape, he says, what's the entire point of the 12 steps? To find God. And how do you do it? Work the 12 steps. And then he has a bunch of superlatives after that, right? Because that's the way Chris talked with some, and I almost stood up on this bus and said, oh my God, I've been trying to do this myself the whole time. Right?
Yeah.
And I get off the bus and I got about a 1/4 mile walk to the office, which I run, right? I run there. And I get to the office and I called my old sponsor, not the one I had in Jacksonville. And I said, at this point in time, I got about 3 or 4 months of dry sobriety, right? Not doing anything. Nothing is improving, right? I'm just not drinking.
Right.
But I'm thinking I'm ready to go. And I called my old sponsor. I said, man, I am doing nothing. I'm scared to death. It's any day now. It's going to be back out and I'm going to kill somebody in the car. I'm going to kill myself in a car. I had an open DUI already in California. I was still waiting to have that settled. And I said, I'm doing nothing with the guy here. We're doing nothing that you've taught me about how to. And I just learned that if I work the 12 steps, I'm going to find God. Yeah. I'm going to build a relationship with God. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So that was this moment, right? So hearing this Chris R this moment, and then I got a new sponsor, who's my current sponsor now, and we did all things that people said. I showed up every time we were supposed to meet. All the homework he gave me, I did, right? When I wasn't sure about things, I didn't care about it. If I would look stupid, I asked questions. I was inquisitive, right? He started to teach me how to get vulnerable, right? And I had started getting a little bit before that because the guy I called to ask for help, he'd give me this feelings chart and said, you're not allowed to call me unless you pick a feeling on here. Right. And because I didn't know, I was the I'm fine, I'm good guy.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, what's going on today? Hey, Rusty, how you doing? I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah.
Right. Meanwhile, I'm tore up inside because I got something I'm not happy about.
Yeah. So
I did those things that we hear all the time, right? I showed up. These guys said jump. I said how high, right? I gave my life away to the sponsor and a couple other people, and I asked them for direction with everything. At 51 years old, I asked them for direction with everything. How do I do this? I want to be helpful to my wife at home, but I don't even know what to do. Here's a list of chores that I do, right? And I started doing those things, I claimed January 28th, 22 is my sobriety date. The reality is it's really about sometime in April when this happened, right?
Yeah.
But here's the magic, and I'll come back to some more of the story, but here's the magic about that. And not last year because I didn't go, but the year before when I went to man with a bunch of you guys, right?
Yep.
Chris R is there.
Oh, wow.
Right. And I get to go up to him after one of the meetings and tell him that story you just told. Right. And for the people who don't know Chris R, he's got an eye patch on one eye and he's crying out of the other eye.
Wow.
As I'm telling this story. Right. And and I'm dying inside. Like, I can't believe this, and it's like it's the solidification of this powerful thing, right? That I was meant to hear that from Chris at that time, because the wound I had inside was large enough for me to finally say, I want to stop tearing it open, right? Because we grow and we start over from the wounds that we have, right? And people call that bottoms, right? My wound just kept ripping open until it finally said stop, right? And that moment was then. So that was the turning point. That was the turning point, and that's when over the next period of time, we follow the recipe, right? My sponsor is very much, some people say he might be a little too mechanical, but we follow the recipe, right? Do this, do this, do this. When this happens, do this. I started to get to know a lot of people, and I've got this trusted tribe of men I talk about all the time that I've given spiritual consent to, and they can call me up and say, you know what? They don't call me on my crap. They don't tell me you're wrong. They don't tell me, you're being dishonest. They give me a consideration. Rusty, we'd like you to consider this. And when that statement comes out, I'm not allowed to respond to it. I'm here to listen to it. And then I go back and I take that into prayer and meditation, right? And I consider what they have to say. And most times to this day, it still means that I'm not being thoroughly open or thoroughly honest, or both.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no judgment. There's no anger. There's no resentment when they say to consider this, right? Because I know deep down in their hearts that they struggle with the same thing or similar things, and they're there to be helpful.
Yeah.
Right. So those are incredibly powerful things, right? And things that why I make phone calls to people, why I go have lunch or breakfast. Or I had this wonderful chance on Friday to drive 5 hours to Charleston, listen to a guy that I respect and love speak, stay the night, and drive 5 hours back. So we drove 10 or 11 hours to hear him speak, but it was 10 and 11 hours of consider this. Are you doing this? And this is a powerful thing. He asked on the way back, because he knows my struggles with my wife and some of the problems. How are things with your wife? And I could say, you know what? There's a guy in meetings who said, if you ever want to know how well you're doing, go to your children and say, how am I as a father?
Yeah.
Go to your wife, how am I as a husband? Right? Most of us won't ask that question because we're full of fear of what the answer is going to look like.
Yeah.
That raised my hand, man. That was me. Right. And wasn't very long ago. I just, this past fall, I asked my wife for the first time in 32 years, how am I as a husband? And the answer was, was not like, you don't get a gold star,
right.
but you might have a corner of that gold star, which was better because before I had nothing, but it was good, and so I can answer the question that, life is a lot better, with my wife now. And her answer to that question, to be very honest, was, I want to spend time with you.
Yeah.
Not that I have to, or I'm forced to.
Right.
That's a huge win when you're a guy like me in a relationship like I had for all those years. Right. So I believe in staying connected with this trusted tribe of people. I believe, and it's not because I want to be able to talk to them all and get the answer I want. It's because I chose these people because these people are willing to hold me, hold my feet to the fire. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm there to hold their feet to the fire. And that's important. The things that I put like in that bio about, hobbies and going to conventions and going to retreats, there's an incredible power in those rooms, right? When you've got some number of people, whether it be 18 people or a man-to-man 400 people, when the lion's share of those people are all there seeking higher power, that funnel is huge, right? And I don't discount that very much. I really take that on as like, this is incredible. And I don't usually like to say I learned something from it, but my spiritual growth definitely improves each and every time I go to these things.
Yeah.
So I love that. I got to the point where I maybe loved it too much and I was doing too much of it. And that 4-letter word that's not 4 letters that we all struggle with, balance, was getting a little out of whack, right? It was all becoming all AA,
Yeah.
And it took the reminder of somebody say, hey, you need to consider that it says a much greater demonstration of our lives is in our families, our occupations, and our affairs. It puts families first, right? Now I think the newcomer needs to maybe reprioritize that a little bit at first, but my balance was like, I'm going to go to 2 conventions or retreats a quarter, and and all this. I'm going to go to 7 meetings a week, and you could deal with cooking dinner and being by yourself all the time. Well, my wife's not married to be by herself all the time, right? So now there's balance, and balance shifts a lot. Sometimes a little too much AA, sometimes a little too much work, sometimes a little too much family. Usually when it's too much family, I get told maybe you can take a trip.
Yeah.
but at least I had the ability to reflect on that.
We used to say when our family spent too much time together that we've had way too much togetherness. Why don't you go to a different room and we separate and do our own thing? But anyway,
well, I really have this I have this thing. I can recognize when my wife's fine. My wife's like, I could deal with a few extra hours of some isolation and alone time. I can recognize that.
That sounds like some rigorous honesty.
Yeah, So I'd like to tell this story. So I talked about, getting fired or losing jobs in active alcoholism. Here's kind of like one of the. So in let's see here. It's just been a little under 2 years ago. I lost a job sober and doing the deal, right? Being honest and all. Yeah. And the work I was working for a private equity firm, and they can only afford to keep one of 2 guys, and they chose the other guy, right? And I'm sitting right here at the desk I'm sitting at right now, and I disagree with their decision, of course, but it was their decision. And I sit here and I'm riddled with fear that I have to go downstairs and tell my wife that I've lost another job. Yeah. And that we're going to have to, tighten our belt and put luxuries aside so we can afford to live. And the first thing that thought to my head was like, okay, maybe I can drag this out and not tell her till Monday. Well, at least have a good weekend. Right. As much as a lie as that would have been.
Yeah.
But this interaction with other people on a frequent basis has taught me, no, the right thing to do is to call. So I called somebody about that. And the first question is, what's your fear? Right? Well, my fear is it's going to bring back all these things when I lost jobs and all the economic insecurity. And my wife is going to, she's going to feel like they're going to take the house and take the car and we're not going to be able to buy food and all that stuff. And they said, can you? I said, yeah. I said, my rough estimate is that, we can live for a while, and live even longer if we just get rid of some minor luxuries. So the recommendation was take 30 minutes and write a quick, dirty budget. Right? Go down and tell her what you just told me. Right? And then also tell her we're going to be okay for this period of time. And by the way, if we tighten our belt a little bit more, we're going to be okay even longer. Yeah. And we're still going to be able to pay the mortgage. We're still going to be able to go to dinner. We're still going to be able to enjoy our time with our granddaughter, right? We're still going to be able to go to here's how ridiculous I'm to our second home, right?
Right.
And although she had a lot of fear because the first thing that pops into her head was, oh, is this guy being honest with me, or did they fire him because maybe he was drunk? He never told me, right? But we laid out this thing, and a couple hours later, she was okay. Still a little fear, but it was okay, And we didn't go that long. We went a few months, 3 months, I think, without work. And, we ate some savings up, but we lived okay. We got rid of some stupid things. We didn't go out to dinner 3 days a week or 2 days a week. Right. We stopped throwing food out when it was in the refrigerator overnight,
Yeah.
And it was okay. And I didn't make my entire next day about finding new work. I just kept doing the same thing. I kept doing what I do every day. Wake up and I got stuff I do in the mornings, right? And I didn't pray to God, please give me a new job tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
I prayed for my wife's peace and that may I be helpful to her today, no matter what that looks like, right? And I didn't go down and say, just give me a new paycheck, right? Because that's not the way I believe God operates. And I think because I just showed up and nothing changed in the way I showed up, I brought her some extra peace. Brought me a lot of peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you kept doing your routine. And what's your routine like, Rusty? Like, what's a normal day from a recovery standpoint for you?
Sure. Yeah. So a normal day is, when I close out this evening, we'll start with this evening. I handwrite a nightly review, almost the way the book tells us in step 11. Was I resentful? Was I afraid? Do I need to discuss something with somebody? Was I helpful? I write that out. And usually what I do, if I need to discuss something, I immediately put it on my calendar for tomorrow and say, okay, I'm going to call person X at 10 o'clock. Because if I don't put it there, I'm not calling them.
Yeah.
And even when I put it there, I don't call them half the time or part of the time, right?
Yeah.
But I try my best to do a nightly inventory every night. And I have this little journal I keep. It's a 7-day journal. And I keep them for about 3 months. And usually every month I go back and look at like three or 4 weeks of it and see if there's some trends going on in my life, right? Am I getting more and more dishonest, either in my head or with other people? Are the things I'm not doing, that I should be doing? We'll talk about that in a second. And usually when my life, when I used to say I'm having a bad week, it's not a bad week. It's because I'm not doing some of the things that have kept me sober.
Yeah.
So I do a nightly review. When I wake up in the morning, the very first thing I do is just say a very simple prayer, right? Just before I roll out of bed, just a simple prayer. But at this point in time, this is when I carve out 30 to 45 minutes for myself in the morning. I usually try to, if I have the luxury, get away from noise and people. I'll come upstairs, and there's 5 things that I read every day, and it's daily reflections. It's 24 hours a day. I like those. I've read them for years now. I usually read them. They're not quite as impactful as they used to be, but I read them because a lot of other people in the program and the people I'm around read them. So it gives me an opportunity to have discussions with them about that stuff, what's meaningful and not. But then I read 3 devotionals. One is Jesus Calling. The other one is Around the World by Emmett Fox, which is essentially a summary of Sermon on the Mount, right?
Yep.
And then I read 365 Tao. So all 3 very different books, right? Well, 2, but I'll tell you, 3 days a week, the message aligns among all 3 of them.
Wow.
And so I read those, and then I go into meditation, right? And I have this thing that meditation that I do with meditation is, if I'm struggling with something, I have a decision I think needs to be made, I'm unsure about it. That's what I'll sit down in meditation and try to put some energy behind. If I'm at content and I'm peaceful life and there's no hanging thing, I'm struggling making a decision, I take something I just read that inspired me and I take that into meditation. And what do I mean by both these things? It's when the mouse starts running on the hamster starts running the hamster wheel and my mind's racing in meditation, I go back to one of those 2 thoughts, right? Whether it be something I read or something I need to make a decision on. And that's how I, for lack of better words, clear my mind.
Sure.
And I'm not one of these guys that sits for 40 minutes in meditation. I'm a 10 to 15 minute guy. And I was telling somebody I was driving tonight, the only wrong way to do meditation is not to do it. And usually I come out of that with a prayer, and that's my morning routine. During the day, I still make an attempt every day to call 5 to 8 people, right? And usually the reason why it's 5 to 8 because I always try to include 2 or 3 people I don't talk to frequently. And I'd say I'm successful at that 5 days a week. There's a couple days a week where, the day just gets away from me. I can't do that. I'm an active member of my home group. I'm there, which is every morning, Monday through Friday. I'm there most, a few times a week. There's a Monday night meeting, case in point, why I was late today, that I when I'm in town, I do everything in my power not to miss. It's one of my favorite meetings in the world. And then here's something. I travel a lot, and I love to get the meetings on the road.
Yeah.
And it's not because I need to be there or I'm at risk of going out and drinking. It's new people, new stories, and here's a great example of that is I was not commuting. I was going out to Seattle about a week a month for over a year. And I started showing up to the same meeting every time I was out there on a Tuesday night. And by about the third month, when I walked in the door, it was, "Hey, Rusty, how you doing?" Right? I wasn't a visitor any longer, right?
Yeah.
And at that third month, it was, "Hey, we never told you, but all of us go get pizza after this meeting." And I was able to get pizza, and I got 6 to 10 guys' phone numbers. So when I was in town, I could put a text chain together, a call, say, "Hey, I'm in town. I can't make the Tuesday meeting, but if anyone, I go to Wednesdays here or Thursdays there," and I got to have this network of guys in Seattle.
Yeah.
Right. I hadn't been back to Seattle since I hadn't worked out in that job for 9 months, and I showed back up 9 months later, and I went to the meeting, went to dinner.
Yeah.
Same guys are there. Same people. They're like, "Hey, we know your name."
Yeah.
They know a little bit of my story. So I really enjoy that. And I get tomorrow night I have to go to New York City for a day, and I got the Atlantic Group, which is probably one of the biggest, most famous meetings in New York City.
Yeah.
And I've never been, so I'm going to go.
That's so cool.
Right. I'm going to go, and I made my flight so I can get there and get on time and make it to the meeting. Right. So I'm not in a position where if I don't go to a meeting for 2 or 3 days that I'm freaked out, but I do believe it's we don't have the luxury of walking into a hospital to try to find people to help anymore. Right.
Yeah.
We can do H&I, I guess, but we're not going to go, "Hey, give us a cork or throw them in that room and let me go over there and talk to them." Right. They're going to say, "Have you heard of this thing called HIPAA? Get out."
Yeah.
So I think H&I and meetings are a place where we find people to help.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's in general, and now I'm down to really trying to get myself to a convention or a retreat once a quarter.
Yeah.
Which I can afford to do, and it doesn't impact or impair my the balance of my life. Right. The fall tends to be a little weird because we normally have the October one with the Easy Does It, and then there's something in September. But otherwise, I try to make it once a quarter, and that's great. And then I have this. I didn't talk about this, but I have this luxury. We have this sponsorship family, right? Yeah. And every Sunday morning, my grand sponsor has a call, and we've been doing it. December was 3 years, and the last 3 weeks, 76 people show up on this call.
Wow!
And it's everything from where there once in a while there's a speaker that he gets on there to there's a topic. Many times it's, "Hey, if you're a newcomer, you haven't worked the 12 steps, this is your time to ask questions." You've got 70 people here that can give you answers, right?
Yeah.
So in 3 years, I've missed that. I missed it this past weekend, ironically, but I missed that meeting 5 times, right? Because and here's why I say this: these people are Atlanta, Birmingham, Chicago, Kentucky, England, South Africa, right? The 76 people that show up are all over the world.
Yeah.
And I get to go to meetings around the country or places, and I get to see these people in real time, and they know something about me.
Right?
Yeah. So I tend to try to go up to the city of Atlanta once a month because I get to see 10 of these guys are on this call every week, and they're in a little box, and I get to see them in person. Right.
Yeah.
It's really been a huge part of of recovery. And the wonderful reason for that is when you've got 70 people and there's a problem going on in your life, somebody in those 70 people have had that same problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I give you this experience with that. Right. And I was, I was in a men's process and there was a relationship I didn't think was really great between my wife and another guy, and I was in active alcoholism at this time, and I was very angry and pissed, and I used that against her. But I also called the place of work this guy worked at and got him fired. Right. So I've got to make amends to this person.
Yeah.
Right. Who was effectively having a relationship with my wife that he shouldn't have been having. I had no clue how to do that. Right. And this honest and open vulnerability of these guys was able to call somebody and say, I don't know how to do this. And he said, you know what? This person's had that same experience. Call them.
Yeah.
So here's the magic of that. And then also the magic of what sold me on meditation is I called that person expecting them to say, you're right. You don't owe that guy nothing. He's a blankety blank, 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 and forget that and throw that page in your resentment book out the window. You're done. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not the answer I got. The answer I got was, I want you to meditate every day for 15 minutes on that person's name. And I want you to put a piece of paper next to you and a pen. And every time a thought comes to you about that person, I want you to write on that piece of paper. And in 5 days, you call me back. I'm like, what kind of corny crap is this? Just tell me I'm right. But I'm at the point still where, like, I'm going to take direction, right? The recipe is the recipe. And I do this. And 5 days later, I look down at that piece of paper and I have my amends written out.
Wow.
Right. And the first person I called was not this guy. The first person I reached out to was that man and said, I've got to drive 3 hours to come see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And there's some things I got to fix that I've done to you. And he's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And I drove 3.5 hours and I made amends, and didn't make it anything about what that person did. It was all about the things I did to him.
Yeah.
I should back up and say I got permission from my wife first,
because
I didn't want to harm her either. But that's the power of a network of people where you're not unique in it, and that's the power of people giving you a suggestion that was probably one of the most impactful things in my recovery, next to that whole Chris Raymer thing or Chris R thing. That just was stunning to me. And like I said, it was the buy-in for meditation to me. Like, okay, that's why I do meditation one of two ways. Is there a decision or a problem I'm facing? I focus on that. Or is it just something that's spiritual I read, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I've gotten that habit from.
An amazing habit to get into. It really is. It really is. So what suggestions would you have for someone who's maybe out there listening that's struggling and not sure what to do?
Well, I mean, the suggestion I have is there's no reason to be prideful enough not to ask for help in any situation, right? With these people that are in these rooms.
Yeah.
No one is judgmental, right? Like I said, at 51 years old, I had to ask people, how do I help my wife clean the house? Because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's an ego deflating thing to say I'm 51. I've had this great career. I've managed 2,500 people, but I don't even know how to clean the house.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say, and it's hard for people to get past that. Right. But if you could just get to a place where, you ask for help, no matter how silly it sounds, no matter what the situation is. Right. I think that's an incredible piece of the equation. Right. Because here, for years, for the 10 years I was back out, right, I reconditioned myself to be a person who didn't know how to do these things, right? It didn't.
Yeah.
The first day I picked that drink up, I still knew how to clean the house. It was 5 years later I didn't know how to pay a bill or clean the house or show up, right? Because I conditioned myself back into that. Well, I need to recondition myself back to the person that knows how to do these things, and that's not a one-day thing.
Yeah.
Right. So asking for help is a big, big thing,
We don't have to do it alone. That's for sure.
We don't have to do it alone. Yeah.
That's a big part. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share your experience, strength, and hope. But I can't let you go without our rapid fire questions, Rusty. No pressure. And I don't have a theme song for it, but I just do my own. It's that's the rapid fire theme right there. That's all I got.
I like it.
And if you are ready, sir.
Go.
All right. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
Faith by my deeds.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
Time takes time.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Trusted tribe of guys.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
Listen.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
Oh, right now it's oh God, I just forgot her name. It's a Fast Car song by what is her name?
Tracy Chapman.
Thank you. Yes. I heard her and what's the name do it in some show. I just love it to death.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing album.
Yeah.
We don't promote albums, but that is an amazing album. If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
Consistency.
What step do you love the most?
11.
What step do you love the least?
Wow. They're all so impactful, but I would say either 6 or 7 because I kind of blend them together, so they're like one big step. So if I get rid of one, I'll get rid of one of those two, but I still right there. So
yeah, fair enough. What is your favorite curse word?
Oh, it's the F-bomb.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You know this already, but you are forgiven.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Thank you, Rusty. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate you taking the time. Just a reminder to those listening, a new episode is released every Thursday at noon. You can listen to the show in your favorite podcast apps, Amazon Audio, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and others. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much, Rusty, for joining us today.
That's great. Thanks, Joe.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's Experience, Strength, and Hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to The Cup of Joe Show.